Sanaa had always been a calm and thoughtful woman, not one to make a fuss over things. Her husband, Jack, on the other hand, was the type of man who liked to plan and dream big, especially when it came to money. They had been married for 8 years, and while they had their ups and downs, Sanaa had always supported Jack, even when his dreams didn't turn into reality. But today was different. Today, they were gathered at the lawyer's office to read the will of Sanaa's late uncle, who had passed away a few weeks ago. He had been a wealthy man, and while Sanaa didn't expect to inherit much, she knew that Jack was hoping for a big share. He had already started making plans for what he would do with the money, the vacations they'd take, the new car they'd buy, the house improvements they'd finally get around to. Jack was confident that the will would be in his favor. After all, he had always thought that his relationship with Sanaa's uncle was good, and he had even been named as a potential beneficiary. The lawyer, an older man with glasses perched on his nose, sat at the head of the room, a thick envelope containing the will in front of him. The other relatives were seated around the table, some with eager expressions, others with curious glances. Sanaa felt a little nervous, though she didn't really know why. She didn't care much for the money. It wasn't what was important to her. She had always believed that family mattered more than inheritance. Jack, on the other hand, seemed unusually calm, almost too calm. His smile never quite left his face as the lawyer began to read out the contents of the will. Sanaa glanced at him nervously, unsure whether his confidence would last or not. She tried to focus on what the lawyer was saying, but all she could think about was how much this moment meant to Jack. Little did Sanaa know what she was about to hear would change everything. And it wasn't what either of them expected. The room was silent, except for the soft rustling of paper as the lawyer adjusted his glasses and prepared to read. Sanaa could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Everyone was waiting for the lawyer to speak, and Jack's hand was resting casually on the table, his fingers tapping lightly. Sanaa glanced over at him. His face was relaxed, but there was a spark of excitement in his eyes. She could tell he was hoping, maybe even expecting, the will to be in his favor. "All right," the lawyer began, his voice steady and clear. "We are here today to read the last will and testament of Mr. Richard Brooks, who passed away on July 1st. Mr. Brooks had a long and fulfilling life, and he was known to many of you here as a kind, generous, and thoughtful man." Sanaa didn't know much about her uncle's personal life, but she always remembered him as a quiet, private man who occasionally sent her postcards from his travels. She had seen him at family gatherings, but they never had deep conversations. She wasn't expecting much from this reading. The lawyer cleared his throat before continuing. Mr. Brooks expressed his wishes to divide his estate carefully among his loved ones. Some of you here are beneficiaries, while others are named as executors or advisors. We will start with the bequests. Jack shifted in his seat, eager for the details to unfold. His eyes flickered between the lawyer and the papers in front of him. The lawyer looked down at the first page and began reading aloud. "To my niece, Sanaa Brooks, I leave my collection of rare books, which I know she has always admired. Also, I leave the sum of $50,000 for her personal use, with the hope that she continues to live a life filled with purpose and love." Sanaa blinked. She hadn't expected anything extravagant, but hearing her name made her feel oddly warm. It wasn't the money that mattered to her. It was the personal connection her uncle seemed to have had with her, even if they hadn't been close. She smiled softly, but her attention shifted back to Jack, who was still sitting with his hands folded on the table. The lawyer paused before moving on. "To my nephew, Jack Thompson," he said, looking directly at Sanaa's husband, "I leave my old watch, which was passed down through my family for generations. It holds great sentimental value, and I hope you will treasure it." Jack didn't seem disappointed at all. He nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. That wasn't the sum he was hoping for, but at least it was something. He leaned back in his chair, clearly satisfied, but not yet fully convinced that this would be all. Sanaa noticed the way his shoulders relaxed slightly, as if preparing for something bigger. The lawyer continued reading, and Jack seemed to grow more confident with every word. "To my close friend, Charles Edwards," the lawyer said, "I leave the sum of $500,000, along with my private art collection, which I know he has admired for many years." Sanaa's thoughts began to wander as she listened to the lawyer read through more names and bequests. Most of the gifts seemed to go to distant relatives and acquaintances, none of which were unexpected. But Sanaa could feel the tension growing in the room. No one seemed to be getting anything that was particularly large. Except, of course, for Charles Edwards, who had clearly been a close friend. Then the lawyer paused. He cleared his throat and looked up at the group, as if preparing to deliver something important. "And now the main bequest," he said, slowly unfolding the final page. "To my beloved niece, Sanaa Brooks, I leave the remainder of my estate. This includes my entire savings, my house in the city, and my vacation properties. I trust that you will manage these assets with wisdom, as you have always shown responsibility and care in your life. I have always believed you to be the person most deserving of this inheritance." The room fell deathly silent. Sanaa's heart skipped a beat. She felt as though the air had been knocked out her lungs. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her uncle, the man she had always admired from afar, had left her everything. Everything. She looked at Jack, but his face had gone white. His lips tightened and his eyes widened. For a moment, she thought he might say something, but instead, he just stared at the lawyer, as if waiting for him to finish. The lawyer continued, unaware of the tension rising between Sanaa and Jack. "As for my nephew, Jack Thompson, I leave a sum of $50,000 to help his future endeavors. I do this with the hope that he will finally use his talents wisely and build a life of his own, separate from the support of others. This is all I can offer him, as I have seen no sign that he is ready to take responsibility for himself." Sanaa's breath caught in her throat. She had known that Jack and her uncle had never been close, but hearing those words out loud was something else entirely. The lawyer had been kind, but the message was clear. Jack had not been the person her uncle had hoped for him to be. The tension in the room was palpable. Sanaa tried to take in what she had just heard, but her thoughts were racing. She hadn't expected this. Not in a million years. Her uncle had left her everything, while Jack, her husband, had been given only a small portion of what he had been expecting. Jack's face was now a mixture of disbelief and frustration. He shifted in his seat, running his hand through his hair. Sanaa could see that he was struggling to hold his composure, though it was clear he was upset. The lawyer closed the will with a soft click and looked around at the stunned faces of the family. "That concludes the reading," he said. "If anyone has questions, I'll be happy to answer them." Sanaa was still in shock. She had always believed that money wasn't important, but now it felt like everything had just changed. And the worst part was, she didn't even know how to feel about it. Jack stood up quickly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Sanaa looked up at him, but he wouldn't meet her gaze. He was already heading toward the door, a tight expression on his face. The others in the room murmured quietly among themselves, but Sanaa felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. What had just happened? And why did it feel like everything was falling apart? The days that followed the will reading were a blur for Sanaa. She tried to focus on the practical side of things, sorting out her new responsibilities, managing her uncle's estate, and figuring out what to do with the sudden influx of wealth. But everything felt clouded by the tension between her and Jack. It was as if the air between them had thickened, heavy with unspoken words and emotions neither of them was ready to deal with. Jack's reaction had shaken her more than she cared to admit. She had expected disappointment, maybe even some frustration, but not this cold anger. It was as if the inheritance had exposed something deeper, something that had been bubbling beneath the surface for a long time. Jack was struggling with more than just his uncle's will. He was struggling with his own sense of self-worth. Sanaa could see that now, but she didn't know how to help him. The more she tried to comfort him, the more distant he became. Jack started pulling away, both emotionally and physically. He spent long hours in his office, working on projects that seemed to go nowhere, while Sanaa was left to deal with the new reality of their financial situation alone. The apartment, once filled with laughter and conversation, had grown quiet. There were no more evening chats over dinner, no more shared plans for the future. Jack would come home late, his face drawn and his mood dark, offering nothing more than a short hi, before retreating to the spare room. Sanaa couldn't help but feel like she was losing him. She had always known that Jack was prone to moods, but this felt different. He had become bitter, almost resentful, and she couldn't shake the feeling that it was all because of the inheritance. It was as if her success, her ability to manage the wealth and take control of her life, was a mirror reflecting everything Jack had failed to do. Sanaa tried to reach out to him. She would prepare dinner and set the table, hoping that the normal routine might ease some of the tension. But Jack barely acknowledged the meal, shoveling food into his mouth without a word. It wasn't just the money. There was something deeper at play, something she wasn't sure how to fix. One evening, as she sat on the couch flipping through the papers her uncle had left behind, Sanaa heard the sound of Jack's footsteps approaching. He was walking slowly, as though dragging his feet, and Sanaa immediately knew that something was off. He had been avoiding her all day, but now he was finally coming to face her. Sanaa's heart skipped a beat, unsure whether this conversation would be the one to either heal or break them. "Sanaa." Jack's voice was strained as he stood in the doorway of the living room. His eyes were heavy, almost as though he hadn't slept in days. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly agitated. "We need to talk." Sanaa's stomach tightened. "I know," she said softly, setting aside the papers. "I've been trying to give you space, Jack, but—" "No," Jack interrupted, shaking his head. "I don't need space. I need answers. I need to understand why this is happening, why you got everything and I got nothing." Sanaa's heart sank. She had feared this moment, when the resentment would bubble up to the surface, when Jack would finally say the things he'd been thinking. It was here now, and there was no escaping it. "Jack," Sanaa said, her voice quieter than she intended. "I didn't ask for this. You know that. I never wanted to inherit anything from my uncle. It just happened. But you've been acting like this is my fault, and it's not." Jack let out a bitter laugh. "Of course it's not your fault. You didn't do anything to earn it. You didn't have to work for it, sacrifice for it. But I have. I've been busting my ass trying to make something of myself. I thought maybe, just maybe, your uncle would recognize that. Maybe he'd see me as someone worthy of something more than a damn watch. But no, he gave everything to you. And now look at us." His voice cracked, and for a brief moment, Sanaa saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. "Jack," she whispered, taking a step toward him. "I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't want to be the one to inherit everything. But it's not about the money. It's about what we do with it, and how we move forward together." Jack shook his head, looking away. "I don't know if I can do that. Sanaa, I don't know if I can just pretend this isn't eating me alive." He clenched his fists at his sides, as if trying to hold himself together. "You've always been the strong one, haven't you? The one who has everything figured out. And now you've got everything and I've got nothing. How am I supposed to feel about that?" Sanaa took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "You're not the only one who's struggling, Jack. I feel like everything's changing too, and I don't know how to handle it. This inheritance, this money, it's not going to solve our problems. It's just a piece of paper. What really matters is us, our relationship, our future. But how can I even think about a future when I feel like I'm just a burden to you?" Jack's voice broke, and his eyes welled with unshed tears. "I thought I could be something more. I thought that maybe this was my chance. But now I don't even know who I am anymore." The weight of his words hit Sanaa hard. She had never fully understood just how lost Jack felt, how much he was struggling with his own identity. She had always supported him, tried to help him find his way, but maybe she had been too focused on her own life, her own path. She hadn't realized that his frustration wasn't just about the inheritance. It was about his fear of never measuring up, of always being the one left behind. For the next few days, Sanaa tried to process everything that had happened. She knew Jack was hurting, but the way he was lashing out at her felt like a betrayal. She had done everything for him, supported his dreams, believed in him even when others didn't. And now it felt as if all that had been thrown back in her face. Her heart ached for Jack, but at the same time, she was angry. She couldn't keep carrying him. She couldn't keep fixing everything for him, especially when he refused to take responsibility for his own actions. The inheritance was just a breaking point, a symbol of everything Jack had been unwilling to confront in his own life. Yet, despite the anger and confusion, Sanaa couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the edge of something that could either tear them apart or force them to confront the truth about who they were and what they wanted. She didn't know which path they would take, but she couldn't avoid the truth any longer. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it was falling apart at the seams. Sanaa sat alone in the quiet apartment, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the only sound breaking the silence. The weight of the past few days hung heavy in the air. She had never felt so distant from Jack. Their conversations had become few, and when they did speak, it was only to exchange curt words or awkward silences. She knew they needed to talk, to really talk, but she didn't know how to bridge the growing gap between them. Her fingers rested on the stack of papers her uncle had left behind, papers that now felt like a heavy burden rather than the gift she had once thought they were. She had tried to be understanding, to be patient with Jack's anger and frustration, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore the fact that their relationship had shifted in ways she didn't know how to fix. It was a Thursday evening when the moment came. Sanaa had just finished a long day of sorting through the estate's financial records and was on her way to bed when Jack's voice broke through the quiet. "Sanaa." His voice was hesitant, almost as if he wasn't sure how to begin. Sanaa turned from the doorway, her heart racing at the sound of his tone. It was different, softer, more vulnerable than she had heard in days. She didn't know what to expect, but she knew this was the moment they needed, the one that could either tear them apart or rebuild the fragile threads of their relationship. "Yeah," she replied, her voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. Jack was standing in the living room, his hands in his pockets, his posture slumped with exhaustion. His eyes, usually so full of pride, were now searching for something, a sense of understanding, maybe, or forgiveness. "I've been thinking," Jack began, his voice quiet but firm, "about everything, about what I said and how I've been acting." He paused, looking away for a second, as if trying to find the right words. "I didn't realize how much I was holding inside. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could just push through. But I can't. I've been angry, and that anger turned into resentment, and I let it all build up. I've been blaming you for things that aren't your fault." Sanaa felt a lump form in her throat, a mix of relief and sadness washing over her. This wasn't the Jack she had known recently. This was the man she had married, the one who could admit his mistakes, who wasn't afraid to face his own demons. "I was so focused on what I can get that I couldn't see what I still have," Jack continued, his voice wavering just slightly. "I've been so obsessed with trying to prove myself, to show that I could be worthy of something, that I didn't stop to think about what really matters. You, us. I took you for granted, Sanaa, and I'm sorry for that. You didn't deserve any of the things I said." Tears welled up in Sanaa's eyes as she took a step toward him. She could hear the sincerity in his voice, see the raw vulnerability in his eyes. This was a Jack she had always hoped would come back. "I did want this to come between us, Jack," Sanaa whispered, her heart breaking. "I never asked for any of this. I never wanted you to feel like you weren't enough. But I can't carry all of this alone. I can't be the only one trying to hold us together." Jack nodded, his eyes flickering with guilt and regret. "I know. I've been selfish. I've been so caught up in my own insecurities that I couldn't see the bigger picture. You've always been there for me, and I've taken that for granted." They stood there for a moment, the weight of their words hanging in the air between them. Sanaa's heart was full, but she wasn't sure how to move forward. She had always believed that love meant unconditional support, but now she realized that love also meant accountability, understanding each other's flaws, and growing together. They couldn't keep running from their issues. They had to face them, together. Jack stepped closer, reaching out to take her hand. "I don't know if I'm ready to be the man you want me to be, Sanaa, but I'm willing to try. For us. I can't keep blaming you for things that aren't your fault. I need to do better. I need to change." Sanaa looked into his eyes, the hurt of the past few days still fresh, but slowly being replaced by hope. "I don't want you to be perfect, Jack. I just want you to be real. I want us to face this together." And in that moment, the distance between them seemed to shrink. It wasn't an instant fix. Nothing could erase the pain that had built up over the past few days. But it was a beginning, a sign that they were willing to work through their differences, to rebuild the trust and love that had once been so strong between them. The next few weeks were a slow and delicate process. Sanaa focused on the estate, managing the new responsibilities with a sense of purpose. Jack, on the other hand, began to confront his own demons, acknowledging the areas in his life that needed work, accepting that he wasn't perfect, and understanding that his value wasn't tied to wealth or external validation. They didn't have all the answers, and there were still moments of tension, but there was something different now, something more honest. They were both willing to face their flaws and to grow together rather than apart. In time, Sanaa realized that the inheritance wasn't just a gift of money or property. It had forced both of them to confront their fears, their insecurities, and the future they wanted to build together. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that, in the end, was all that mattered. Weeks passed since the turning point in their relationship. The emotional storm that had rocked Sanaa and Jack slowly began to settle, and the quiet hum of everyday life returned to their apartment. It wasn't perfect. They still had their challenges, and the echoes of the past few weeks lingered in their conversations. But they were different now. Both of them. Something had shifted, and they knew they were in this together, no matter how difficult or uncertain the road ahead might be. Sanaa had always believed in the power of love and understanding, but in the wake of everything, she had come to realize that love alone wasn't enough to fix everything. It wasn't about just forgiving each other. It was about learning to communicate, to express their feelings honestly without fear of judgment. The more she thought about it, the more she understood that the emotional distance between her and Jack had not come from the inheritance itself. It had come from their inability to address the real issues underneath it all. Jack had never been good at expressing his feelings, and it had taken this crisis for him to realize how much he had been holding back. But since that night of honesty, things had begun to change. He made an effort to talk more, to share his frustrations and doubts. Instead of bottling them up, he started to open up about his fears, about not feeling good enough, about his sense of failure, about how he had always measured his worth by external markers like success and money. It wasn't easy for him. There were days when his insecurities would flare up again, but this time he knew where to turn. Sanaa was there, patiently listening, offering him the reassurance he needed without trying to solve everything for him. And in turn, Sanaa had learned something valuable too. She realized that she couldn't keep trying to fix Jack, or anyone for that matter. She had always been the one to pick up the pieces, to be the strong one, but she had to allow herself to be vulnerable too. She had to share her own fears and insecurities, the ones she had been too proud to admit. She had been terrified of losing Jack, of losing the life they had built together. But in the process, she had forgotten to take care of herself. She had learned, in the most painful way, that her worth wasn't tied to how much she could give or how much she could fix. Their relationship now felt more balanced. They were both learning to trust each other more fully. They had faced their worst fears, the fear of rejection, of inadequacy, of failure, and had come through it stronger. The estate was still in the process of being settled. Sanaa had taken charge of managing the finances, but now that Jack was involved, they made decisions together. It was no longer just a responsibility. It was their shared responsibility. They discussed everything, from investments to charity donations to plans for the future. One afternoon, while they were sitting at the kitchen table going through some documents, Sanaa turned to Jack, a thought suddenly striking her. "You know, we could do something more with this money. It's not just about paying bills or buying stuff," she said, her voice thoughtful. Jack looked up from the papers. "What do you mean?" "I've been thinking," Sanaa continued, "maybe we should use some of this money to create something meaningful, like a scholarship fund or a foundation. I know it sounds like a big step, but if we could help other people, maybe we could find a way to give back, to use this gift for something that goes beyond us." Jack stared at her for a moment, considering her words. A smile tugged at the corners of his mouth, and for the first time in a while, Sanaa saw the spark in his eyes, the spark of hope and purpose. "I like that idea," he said. "It feels right." It was the first time that Jack had truly seemed excited about their future. He was no longer focused on the bitterness of the past or the anger over the inheritance. Instead, he was looking forward to what they could create together, something lasting, something meaningful. They spent the next few weeks researching how they could set up a scholarship fund in memory of Sanaa's uncle, who had always been passionate about education. It was a way to honor his legacy, but more importantly, it was a way to make their newfound wealth mean something more than just financial gain. They also discussed other projects, giving back to the community, supporting local artists, and funding programs that provided support to underprivileged children. For the first time, Jack felt like he was contributing, not just to their relationship, but to something greater than himself. He had spent so much time trying to build his own life on his terms, but now he realized the real fulfillment came from sharing his success with others. The process wasn't overnight. There were still moments of tension, moments when Jack would retreat into himself or when Sanaa would feel the weight of responsibility bearing down on her. But the foundation they were building, one rooted in communication, trust, and mutual respect, began to grow stronger with each passing day. In many ways, they had come full circle. They had started with love, but now they had something deeper, a partnership. They understood that neither one of them had all the answers. They both had their flaws, their fears, and their weaknesses. But together, they were stronger than they had ever been. Jack had learned to appreciate the depth of Sanaa's strength, not just as a partner, but as a person in her own right. He had always admired her, but now he respected her in a way he hadn't before. And Sanaa, for her part, had learned that she didn't need to carry everything on her own. She could rely on Jack, just as he could rely on her. They were equals, not only in love, but in every aspect of their lives. As the months passed, Sanaa found herself looking at Jack not as someone who was just a part of her life, but as someone who was her equal, someone who had grown alongside her. Their marriage wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough. One quiet evening, as they sat on the balcony of their apartment, watching the sun set over the city, Sanaa turned to Jack. "Do you think we figured it all out?" she asked, a smile playing on her lips. Jack looked at her, his eyes warm. "Not even close," he replied, his voice filled with affection. "But I think we're heading in the right direction." And for the first time in a long time, Sanaa felt a deep sense of peace. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew that as long as they were together, they could face whatever came their way. They had weathered the storm. They had learned from it, and now they were moving forward together